I'm now in Charlestown, Indiana, at the Charlestown Cemetery. Right here is the grave of Indiana's first governor, Jonathan Jennings. So this is where the first governor is laid to rest. Looks like there's a timeline of some of the major events. I guess the Freemasons also gave him a grave marker in 1982. So Jennings was born on March 27, 1784 in either New Jersey or Virginia. I'm not sure how they mixed that up, but one of those two. And then he later on emigrated to the Indiana Territory. He came to Indiana in 1806 and he intended to practice law in what was in the territorial capital, Vincennes. But he ended up an assistant to the territorial legislature, and he got into land speculation. In 1807, he was appointed clerk of Vincennes University, which is the oldest university in the Indiana Territory. Now, William Henry Harrison was the president of that board. He was also the first territorial governor. So a lot of lists will list William Henry Harrison first, but he is actually the first governor. And he got into a dispute with Harrison. He got that position in the first place because the guy who was in that position resigned after Harrison proposed to ban the French from using the university, and Jennings was selected over Harrison's boy, Henry Hurst. So Harrison was really pissed off, and that is where their troubles began. I do want to mention on the bicentennial on December 11th, 2016, I was at the Indiana Historical Society, and one of the things they were doing is they had actually developed a play called Harrison. It's a spoof of Hamilton, and basically it was showing like the Hamilton-Burr relationship as the Harrison-Jennings relationship here in Indiana. So that's pretty interesting. I'll show a clip that I took from that now. I wasn't making videos at that time.
Just a little dorky. Listen up! Your rhyme stink! People like you like Jar Jar Binks! I am just around in the new hope! I'm the new hope that people can cope with! You are old news! You are the reason that they're singing the blues! Guess what? It's not what you got planned! I'm Jonathan Jennings! You just got jammed!
Oh! Doing up with. Doing alright. He's doing alright. Didn't race that, so he's doing it right. You are doing that, Dad. They really doing that, Dad. He is taking pictures. And Logan taking pictures. I got some sprinklers. Oh, you killing them!
So after his dispute with Harrison on the board, he ended up getting into politics. He decided to run in the race for the Indiana Territory's delegate to the U.S. Congress, and he was successful at that by dividing the pro-Harrison supporters and running as an anti-slavery candidate. You could see a huge divide in the pre-statehood days between Harrison and Jennings, because Harrison, he was a Southerner. He was born on a plantation in Virginia, had slaves, and he wanted Indiana to be more like the South culturally, while Jennings wanted to be more like the North. And overall, in the end, Jennings did win out. Harrison resigned as governor in 1812, and Jennings was in full control of the state legislature. His anti-slavery faction controlled government and what legislation was being passed. And as delegate to Congress, he was able to get the Enabling Act of 1816 passed, which allowed for Indiana to be up for consideration as a state. And then on December 11th, 1816, his dream became a reality. Indiana became the next state. Because of that and his leadership qualities, he was elected as the president of the Constitutional Convention for the Indiana State Constitution to be written in Corydon. I know he was behind Article 5, which included specifically banning slavery forever. Also, he was very much in favor of a strong legislative branch over the other two. Since the Constitution enabled elections in 1816, he ran against Thomas Pusey, Indiana's last territorial governor, and he won. Now, under the state constitution at the time, the governor could serve a 3-year term. He could not serve more than 6 years in a 9-year period. Now, in his inaugural address, he talked about slavery a lot. In 1818, he began promoting a large internal improvement plan that included canals, all that stuff that when enacted years later put Indiana severely in debt. Now we get into his big scandal. So he was the federal commissioner in charge of the Treaty of St. Mary's proceedings in 1818. And this was a treaty that basically forced the Delaware Indians, pretty much all of them, out of the state of Indiana. So that's not why it's controversial. This was seen as going beyond his powers as governor. His opponents said, you know, you can't be both, you can't be the governor, but also the federal commissioner in charge of that. And because of that, his own lieutenant governor, Christopher Harrison, declared himself the acting governor of Indiana. So the House of Representatives went into investigation mode. Jennings was apparently mortified, quote, when he heard about this and destroyed the papers about his federal commission. And then there was a vote about this. And luckily for him, the vote went 15-13, recognizing him as the governor of Indiana and dropping any legal proceedings about the matter. And Harrison was mad and resigned as lieutenant governor. Early on in 1808, he bought property here in Charlestown. That's why he's not buried in court, and he did have a house there during a lot of that time. But his main home, his property, was out here. Now, there was the Panic of 1819. That severely hurt his finances. He was kind of working with his businesses and interests on the side as governor. That wasn't as big of a deal as it was then. I mean, it's not really now. But he had one big flaw. He was also a severe alcoholic, and that pretty much led to his downfall. I mean, most guys back then were alcoholics. Like, drinking whiskey and stuff was safer than drinking the water usually. But still, this became crippling for him. He ended up in a lot of debt, and he wasn't really able to handle his finances, and he ended up being evicted after being governor from his property here. He actually ended his second term early. William Hendricks ended his Senate seat. He resigned early, so Jennings went to that and he won that seat. After his one term, he ran 2 more times and was defeated in both. And this is where his downfall began. His wife died in 1826, and he was also suffering from rheumatism, and in 1827 the ceiling plaster from his DC boarding room fell on his head, severely injuring him. So when his estate was starting to seriously be seized upon, his friend, then Senator John Tipton, decided to step in, and he actually purchased the land and the home just so that he could stay there and live his life there. And some of those finances were paid off by big-time banker James Lanier in Madison. And basically he just lived the rest of his life there alone as a sad sack and just drinking his life away. And that's the tragic end of Indiana's first governor. He was 50 years old when he died, probably of a heart attack, on July 26, 1834. He was so in debt and so poor that he couldn't afford a gravestone. So until this marker was put here in 1893, there was no gravestone, nothing marking the grave of Indiana's first governor. There you can see they're erected under an act of the General Assembly in 1893. Before then, there was no gravestone marking that he was here. Maybe at some point I should try to hit all of the graves of the Indiana governors. I don't think that's ever been done before, to my knowledge. So this is a start. Looks like this is the old receiving vaults. Alright, the door's kind of cracked open so you can see what the inside will look like. If you like this video, I have a bunch of other videos at historic sites, roadside attractions, all sorts of stuff. So please go check out my other videos. And thanks for watching.
Thanks for coming out and freezing in the snow. Woo! I will not betray you like my man Lando. But if you follow me, we'll have a great years. So put away your hopes and dreams and we'll feed off of your fears.
2 hours later.
Alright, I'm gonna go on in. It's usually I'm kinda hot, but my face is now lukewarm.
Oh, 32 days later.
All right, honey, I have some hot tea for you to drink up, okay? That was really dumb. Really, really dumb of you to do that. But if you would have worn the suit, you probably would have been fine.
I guess the presidency has clouded my mind.
Just, you know, just stay alive. It'd be just really ridiculous if you just died after 32 days being in office.
I'm becoming one with the Force.